Hello and welcome to the second in a series of 3 videos about how to improve your body use. Now we've all been sitting a lot in recent weeks, and today we are going to be looking at how you can align your joints really easily and comfortably when you're doing simple activities like sitting or using your smartphone or your laptop. And a word about posture. Posture is something you can't get right all the time. You can't have perfect posture all the time. So what I'm hoping to give you today is a kind of a home position that you know you can go back to when you maybe have been sitting badly or lying in bed using your laptop. And the good news is the body actually tells you when you're doing something it doesn't like. It sends you a signal, either pain or discomfort, or just a general feeling of unease. So we can use that signal that we're getting from the body to say, aha, how can I change what I'm doing? I'm obviously not, sitting properly. So that's what we're about today. So let's get started. So the joints of the body that want to be lined up where possible are as follows. The joint of the head, right here. A lot of people aren't aware that this is where your head meets your spine, but there's actually a joint just below your earlobes, and your head balances on the top if you are aligning your joints. The second joint is the shoulder. So these joints are now lining up. And the third joint when you're sitting is the hip socket. So those 3 joints, when they stay lined up, you will automatically have better posture. So have a go with that and see if you can do it without force, because most people feel because they have to hold themselves up, they're giving it sort of more tension like this than is necessary. So another interesting body fact that might help you is that your spine is central in your torso. So it's not at the back. Most people think their spine is back there somewhere, but actually the bit that holds you up is in the center of this torso. So just by having a thought in your mind of allowing the joints to align up and that your spine is central will just help you to have better posture. Another very important fact that we looked at in the first video, and we're going to look at again now, is the sitting bones or the sit bones. They are the 2 bony outcrops at the bottom of your torso which you should be sitting on at all times. And we're going to find them by placing our hands palm up underneath the back side. If you move around, you will feel those hard bones. And when you take your hands away, notice whether you can stay on those 2 bones. Because they're rounded, they can also cause bad posture, like this. So what you really want to do is to remain right at the highest point of those 2 bones, and then naturally your hip, shoulder, and ear will all line up. Now, if you still feel that this is difficult and you want to fall backwards, it is probably because your hip flexors, that's the muscles in and around the hips, are too tight. And we all have tight hip flexors because we don't really move like we did when we were children, when we squatted more, like these kids in the pictures. But I can show you a little trick now that will help to release those hip flexors and get them to be a little bit more flexible again. So here we go. You're sitting on the edge of a chair on the highest point of your sit bones, and we're going to hinge from the hips. So we're going to keep these 3 joints aligned as much as we can and just hinge. And you can rest your arms on your legs, because this isn't really about doing a really big stretch. It's about coaxing those hip flexors to remain longer. And you can stay like this for not long, 30 seconds. And when you come back after staying like this, what you will notice is that it seems easier to stay at the tops of those sit bones. Okay, so let's round up. We've got a few facts to work with now. We know that the head joint, the shoulder joint, and the hip joint are designed to stay basically aligned a lot of the time. I don't want to say all the time because that makes it sound as if you're going to have to try too hard. They want to naturally align anyway. We also found out that there are sitting bones underneath us when we sit, and if we can just stay at the tops of those, rather than leaning back onto the backs of them, our posture will improve. The third thing we looked at was that by hinging forwards and feeling a little bit of a stretch around the hip and just staying like that for a moment helps to free off the hip flexor so that when we come back, it's much more comfortable to stay like this. So I have a question for you. If you had a choice between holding up this item or this item for 10 minutes in front of yourself, which one would you choose? Now I'm assuming you would all choose the phone because the phone is lighter. And in fact, this is the weight of the human head. So I would argue that if you are having bad posture when looking at your smartphone with your head forward like this, you're actually carrying both weights anyway. So what is the best way of using your smartphone? So the best way of using your smartphone would be, as we mentioned earlier in this video, to keep these three joints aligned where possible. And the head joint, the one at the top, is a very special kind of joint. It's actually a sliding joint. And what that means is the head can slide looking downwards and it doesn't actually come out of alignment with these joints. I'll do that a few times so you can see. I look down, I look up, and as you can see, I'm still able to line up those three joints. So that's the first bit of information which will help us. The next thing I want to say, we saw earlier that the head weighs 10 pounds, and since the phone is so much lighter, it just makes more sense to bring this up rather than to bring this down. And there's a good happy medium there as well. We can be looking down by letting the head stay aligned, and at the same time, we can just bring the phone up enough to be able to look into the phone comfortably. And I want to point out that I've got my arms sort of on the sides of my body, and I'm using my elbow as a hinge so that I can use my phone anywhere along this line of sight, and I will be helping to support my arms while I'm looking at the phone. There's another way which actually would be also quite useful for using your smartphone, and that is to use this hinging from the hips that we talked about earlier. So I'm now hinging from the hips and looking at my phone, but as you will see, I am still lining up my three joints. So this idea of lining up your joints really does come in handy for all kinds of things. And as you can see from the two pictures here, there are good ways of looking down and not so good ways of looking down. So I've got my laptop here, and the one issue with laptops is they don't allow you to independently adjust the screen or the keyboard. But that said, we're going to look at the best way to use a laptop as it is. And my suggestion would be that if you are going to be using it for any period of time, then I would always use a desk or a table and a chair rather than lying in bed or lying on a sofa. And the next thing I would say would be that you want the angle of the arm to allow the shoulder and the elbow to remain lined up. And I'll show you a little bit more what I mean about that. If the screen is too far away on the keyboard, your arms are going to migrate forwards and these joints aren't lining up. And what happens is after a little while, your body will want to go forward to the keyboard. So by bringing the laptop as close as possible to the edge of the desk or table, you are maintaining this relationship between your shoulder and your elbow, and it just makes it much, much easier. The next thing to say is that you want to adjust the screen so that you can look comfortably into the screen and not disturb the lovely balance between this joint and this joint. And remember, we talked about the swivel, which will allow you to look into the screen. Now, I'm going to show you another way of using your laptop if you are going to be sitting for a long period of time, and that is to raise the actual laptop onto a higher surface and get a separate keyboard and mouse. Now, I'm using a wired version here. You could just as easily and probably better have a wireless keyboard and mouse, which would just boot up with your computer via Bluetooth. But for our purposes, we'll be looking at this setup. And again, we want the keyboard to be in a place that allows us to type easily. Now we've got the screen higher up, which allows us to have a much more comfortable neck relationship with the shoulders when we're looking forwards. And we've got the separate mouse over here. So that's the second suggestion of how to use your laptop. So let's just run through a few useful tips for using laptops. Number one, if you can raise your computer higher and have a separate keyboard and mouse, that is ideal. Number two, if you can't do that, then make the best use of the space you have by sitting on a chair with a table or a desk in front of you, and bring the laptop close enough to allow your joints to align. And number three, think about your posture. Are you allowing for the alignment of all of your joints? Remember, it's possible to go forward without disturbing the balance of these three joints by using your hips. And I'll just show you a few times like that. So if you're reaching for something, or you're just inclining yourself slightly forwards, you will be able to do that if you use the hips properly. And so just a few final comments now. If you are going to be sitting for long periods of time at a computer, do get up and move around from time to time and give your body a little bit of a break. And don't forget to stay well hydrated. Have a glass of water at the side of your workstation and sip throughout the day is the best way. And finally, if you are going to be lying in a bed or on a sofa to use your laptop, then keep in mind some of the things we said today about lining up the joints. And you can do this by propping yourself up with some pillows and maybe raising your laptop up in front of you on some cushions or some pillows, and that should do the trick. So thanks for watching, and if you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to leave them for us. And I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.